Hi, and welcome to another video. In this video, what I want to show you is what your day-to-day kind of looks like as a software engineer, as it's very different from school, and in my experience, and it could be different for different schools, but they don't really prepare you for this kind of thing in school. And I think it gives you perspective when you're studying at school, or whether you're going to boot camps, whatever you are doing to prepare for a career in software engineering. I want to give you some perspective on the skill sets that you're going to need. And in this video, I'm just going to give you a general overview, and then we may actually go into details of some things. So this one's going to have no coding. It's more of a high-level overview. So usually when you actually join a company as a software engineer, you're going to be in a team, and they either follow like all these different processes for developing code. Some use Scrum, some use Kanban. There's all different methodologies. But the idea is that you get a set of requirements from a product owner, and they have a product in mind, and they have a budget, and they have a development team who develops that product. So as a development team, you get assigned usually to a product owner, and you go from there. And usually you have a board like I'm showing you here, where you kind of keep track of the requirements and what you need to do, and you work with your team to get it sorted out. In my experience, most of the teams that I worked on are between 5 to 10 people, and usually I think a lot of companies at this point are using Scrum as a way to do projects, which is basically you have these 2 weeks intervals, and different people do it different ways. That's not so important, but the general idea is you have these 2-week time intervals where you actually deliver some requirements, which are called user stories, etc. Right? So the idea is that you go, and again, you don't get exposed to this as much in school, because you just get homework and assignments, and you do them. So you don't really deal with these semantics, but it's a big part of the job when you actually go in, so it's good to have an idea around it. So usually you have something called the backlog of requirements, and we're going to approach this with the League project that we've been working on. So let's say we're working on a game like League, and there's going to be something called the backlog, where you have like all the requirements that the product owner wants you to achieve for the project, right? And this backlog has different, we call these user stories, but you can think of it as requirements or things that need to be delivered by the development team. And usually what happens is the product owner writes this in the way that they understand. Okay, so like over here, you can see that you might go into a meeting with the product owner and the whole team. Now, when you join a team, you're a junior, right? So, initially you're just going to be listening for the most part. But you can also give opinions and ask questions, and I would encourage everyone to do so, because being a critical thinker is part of being a good software engineer. So you'll see a requirement, something like this, after a player kills a number of minions, they should level up. So you look at this, and then the number one thing you should understand is that when you become a software engineer, and whenever you join a company, you're going to have to gain domain knowledge of what you're working on. So for example, if you join a financial institution, and you're working on a financial product, you have to get some knowledge on the financial aspects. Like if you're working on a card processing thing, you need to gain knowledge of cards. How does the processing work? You need to understand the language to some aspect. So that's part of the job. Now if you're into gaming, like here, like if you've been like me and you've played the game for years and years, you already have that knowledge. And That way you can actually participate in these meetings, and these understanding these requirements become a bit easier, and you can give more informed opinions. So you get on these calls with the product owner to try to understand what he's asking you to do. So when you read a requirement like this, the first, as you get more and more experience, you read this and you're like, this is not something I can, like, there's not enough details to this requirement that I could actually code it. So what ends up happening is you start having these conversations with the product owner to try to extract these details out, right? So for example, just looking at this, right? Is this to add, how many level ups should I add? How many minions should they kill to level up? Do melee minions count the same as ranged minions? Does killing players give experience? What should happen when a player levels up, right? Should they get a skill? Should their attack damage go up? Should their health go up? So as you can see, there's like all this information that's just missing in this, and chances are that the product owner doesn't know as much detail as you do. And I mean, in my experience, I've dealt with different kind of product owners. Some know a bit more, some know a bit less. But oftentimes, the developer, since they're in the nuts and bolts of the code and the application, they certainly know a lot more detail. So it's part of your job as the developer to try to extract these details and find the missing things, and that's a big part of your job that you don't really get that much exposure in school, because they usually give you the assignments and all the details are there. So two things are important here. One, your communication skills as a software engineer is extremely important. It really actually makes you stand out in the job if you're able to communicate the complex technical things in a language that the product owner understands, and being able to communicate with them properly is a huge advantage, and it would be good if you can try to practice that as you're in school. And I think the best way to do it is teaching. So at every opportunity, if someone needs help with, especially like with the programming stuff, and trying to teach them, because that person obviously doesn't know that concept. So if you can teach them that concept in a language that they can understand, it's also good practice for you here as well. So after you add some details, so let's say over here you talk to the the product owner, and you say, for example, after killing 6 minions, level up, get HP and skill point. Sorry, I'm not able to type today. So something on this line, right? And obviously this is not enough detail, but we'll just go with this. So after you do this, what they would ask you to do as well in a lot of jobs is to ask you to estimate how long it's going to take you to do this. And this part is kind of annoying. And I think it's mostly done for the management reasons. It's not necessarily to help you as a development team. I mean, at least that's my personal opinion on it. It could be wrong. So usually they tell you to, okay, estimate this. Some people say, tell me how many days it's going to take you. Some people say, just give it a number, 1, 3, 5, 7, and you have to do that as well. It's not something you can really practice for. It's just for you to know that this is part of the job. So once you estimate this, you actually take it, you tell your team, I'll take this story, and they'll give it to you, and you bring it to your to-do list on your board, and you basically start working on it. So, then you get into coding, and I want to actually go into the coding part, because the coding part is also different from school in most ways, because in school usually you get an assignment, you get a project, you just want to finish it, make it work the way that it's the way that you get your grade. In actual software engineering, and when you're writing production code, it's not just about that. The code has to be flexible. It needs to be easy to read because other people are going to actually work on your code as well. It needs to be flexible. It should be easy to add stuff to it. It should be testable. There's a lot of things that go into it, which we would go into next in another video. But one other aspect that happens in software engineering a lot that does not happen in school is that you have to read a lot of code. And that's because usually you're not working on you're not starting a project from scratch every time like you do in school projects. There's already a code base, and it's usually in shambles, and you have to try to read and make sense of it. So that's one good thing to get used to as you're going through school, is just being able to read code and understanding it. So for example, in our case, we already started this project, and you wanted to write the level up feature that you have in your story, but you would have to read the code first, understand it, and then add to it. Once you actually do your code changes and everything, then you use a tool like Git, which you can think of as a tracking tool for code changes that you make. And this isn't something that they force you, at least they didn't do it for me, they don't force you to use it in school, but it's very important. I mean, every team uses it because it keeps track of who made changes to which parts of the code, and it's the way you track code changes. So it's important to learn it. We'll look at it in another video, but it's good for you to know the name and maybe explore it a little bit on your own. And once we actually make the video and talk about Git a little bit, it's good if you could actually do your assignments, your projects through Git and practice the ins and outs, because I've noticed that a lot of when software engineers come into company, and I experienced this myself, I didn't use Git much. It was one of the hurdles I had to come over, I had to cross when I joined, when I got my first job. So it's good if you learn it, it'll help you transition. So once you actually finish the story, usually writing tests, different companies approach it in different ways. In some companies, the software developer themselves have to do all the testing. In some companies, they have like a QA team which writes some of the tests for you. And in this process, they either find some bugs, they find some issues with what you developed in your feature, and they let you know. So having tolerance for making mistakes is important. Like it's not beneficial if if we rage at like the QA team of this isn't an issue, this is not my fault, this is his fault, blah blah blah. It's important to be ready to handle issues in the code. And one other aspect is writing tests is extremely important when you're writing production code. So practicing it in your project's assignments, not only will it make it easier for you to write good code for your project's assignments and finish faster, but it also prepares you for actually getting a job as a software engineer. So I can't emphasize this enough, that work on tests. And after that, you kind of finish with your feature. And at that point, what ends up happening is that you have all these different environments and you promote code. So you have like this environment where you develop the new features, but then what ends up happening is you have other environments, like you have staging, you have for example production. So you take this piece of code, you ship it to these different environments, and then you actually send it to production and put it in front of a client. So there's a lot that goes into it which you don't really experience in school, and I can showcase to you that in another video, how you actually promote a code to different environments and different kind of tests are run on those environments, and then it goes to production. So as you can see, there's a lot more going on than just writing code in the software engineering job. So it's good to try to get the different skill sets and get yourself familiarized with it, because when you actually, and I experienced this myself, it's very hard when you actually don't look into this stuff and then you suddenly have to transition to a software engineering job. It's just you'll get under a lot of pressure. It's not that you can't do it. You just have to. It's just a heavy hit. You're like, oh wow, like what was I doing in school all these years? Because the focus that they put in algorithms and stuff like that in school, in some jobs you don't even like have to use a lot of those skill sets. And then there's these other skill sets like design patterns, Git, writing production ready code, being able to communicate with the product owner, pipelines, etc., which are so critical in the actual job, are not taught in school, at least not in my school. So maybe other people have better experiences. So just keep this in mind when you're going through school, and we'll get into the details of some aspects of coding and other stuff in the coming videos. All right, thanks for watching.